On the reality show today, a St. Lucian furthering her studies in political science, now working on her master's, Rhyesa Joseph continues her conversation on youth and leadership and the question, do tomorrow's leaders feel pressure communicating with youth who may live in an era of mass distraction? What is it that motivates somebody to want to study political science?
That's a very interesting question. When I was at Sir Lewis Community College, my passions resided in history. I also did sociology and Spanish. And when I decided I was going to go to the University of the West Indies, I spoke to one of my lecturers and also consulted family with regard to what my passions were and interests. Originally, I was swaying towards history, and my sister was like, Rhyesa, you always do history. Do something that is more dynamic, that meets your needs. And when I looked at the course of offerings that were available at the University of the West Indies, political science looked like an interesting field that allowed me to hold that historical kind of background that I wanted to, and also enthuse me with more information.
Good. So at the time, because a lot of students, we think political science, and I'll probably ask you later on as well, but in terms of, do you see, what role did you see yourself playing with that, or is that something you're going to use for other purposes? We don't want you to give us too much of your own career development and where you want to go with it, but I was just trying to get in terms of your mindset, did you see that that's something that you would do as a career for the rest of your life or for a good part of your life?
Okay. Well, for persons who don't know what political science is, generally when they hear the term political science, they automatically think electoral politics. But political science is a lot broader than that. It studies societies, power, who gets it, how, and how that impacts the structure of your society. So for me, political science is a field that provides a platform to enter multiple areas of development, whether that is journalism, governance, education and history. In the private sector, political scientists give businesses a vision of how they move forward and develop. So for me, it helped root me and ground me in a lot of things that were important to Caribbean development, especially St. Lucia.
So when we look at our current parliament makeup, and when we look at your class, for example, of political scientists and so on, do they think of active politics as one possible way, and then compare that to what we have now? We don't seem to have too many political scientists in our parliament.
There's currently, I believe, only one who studied political science, and the rest generally tend either to be lawyers or, if I'm to be honest, career politicians who don't have necessarily a field in anything else.
But they have the street cred.
They have the street credibility, and of course the voters elected them to represent them. Within my class of political scientists, some are interested, but there are pull and push factors which would make it a frustrating environment to want to be in. For example, we have the benefit of accessing knowledge that would have made us, I would not say better than, but more able to look at things constructively and critically and to put forward particular solutions. When you study political science, you don't remain the same person. Now, when you return to your society and your eyes are more opened, you want to share information with people, sometimes the feedback that you get is not always the most encouraging. It's disheartening, and you're coming into an environment that you want to change, but there are established norms and practices that don't like change, especially young change that is coming to the fore. And unless you are prepared to meet those challenges, then many persons would stray away and opt for other options, other career paths within the field of political science.
We'll get back to that. I want to finish acknowledging your accomplishments. We want to celebrate that as well. Valedictorian of the UE class. So what was your message to the class?
My message was tailored around Derek Walcott's Love After Love, and taking a good look at ourselves as a Caribbean society, our responsibilities as, well, I was speaking to the graduating class, so students looking at themselves not just as placeholders. So you leave university and you enter a job. Your role is not just to enter and take up space, but to transform it and improve the foundation that you would have already achieved when you got into it. It's about recognizing greater cultural strides and establishments within the region, looking at how we have treated each other as people and as nations too. Part of my speech referenced the need to right the wrong that we've done to our Haitian brothers and sisters and its treatment within our region. When we talk about strong Caribbean regionalism, we don't often look at the areas where we are lacking, and that is one of them as well. The message also focused on a calling of this is our now moment. People always speak of a generation that has gone before them that has established and done something. At a passé, nous savons c'est goumon là j'avais chai pour we bon nous mais actuellement ça là qui ça nous qu'a fait pour éprouver et pour nous ouais cette siècle Caraïbes là nous voulons lever maman dedans. So for me it was a moment of calling a greater responsibility of a Caribbean society that took a look at itself, who we are, what is beautiful about us, what needs to change, and recognizing that everyone has a responsibility in shaping that kind of Caribbean environment, whether it is in St. Lucia, in Barbados, or within the diaspora in the UK, Canada, and the United States.
So when you look at the makeup of the Caribbean, and you look at the youth movement and also the youth, just the organization and so on throughout the region, what is there to celebrate in terms of youth and their readiness to play an active role in the development of the country in terms of governance and so on?
When it comes to young people throughout the region, I think there is an overwhelming reservoir of passion, talent, ingenuity, and persons who, if given the right outlets, can be great agents for social change and development. How they do that depends on self-awareness, and understanding of what their role is in society, mentorship, and as well as the wider international community and economic opportunities available to them as well. So for me, there is a lot of potential. I think many persons, however, are missing the mark when it comes to recognizing that youth work, national work, is about solidarity and partnership. So when you talk about the youth, they need individuals like yourself to encourage them and to work with them to enable them to meet the strides that they want to make.
When you look at here, I don't know too much about the other islands, I'm sure it's probably the same as well. In terms of youth organizations, we seem to have a little deficiency in that area. I think there's an effort now to revive or to get the NYC back on track again. The other youth organizations we have are sports, youth and sports councils, clubs. I'm not sure, I suppose some of the churches have youth groups. The political parties are supposed to have youth arms, but I think they're probably more active closer to election time and so on to make statements. But in terms of activism and so on, in terms of doing things, being proactive, we're not getting that sense. What do you think is probably responsible for, like I know you said there's a passion and so on, but in terms of the moving to the next step to actually getting things done or making your voice heard or getting very involved in things at a different level, at a higher level?
At a higher level
And it doesn't have to be politics, it's just in community, for example.
Well, the thing is, there are youth. I don't normally like to class any youth in any box or label, but very often the youth that are seen are quote-unquote elite youth, those who do exceptionally well academically and, as you rightfully indicated, in sports. But there are other young people that we may not give the spotlight necessary, doing tremendous work in the community on a more grassroots level, and that's something that we don't generally focus on within the communities, whether it's to coach or to mentor other young people, to teach cultural dancing like Kutumba, perhaps in PI. There are young people who do that. What happens when persons want to take it further afield speaks to the strength of organizations in general that are existent. How strong are they, and do they allow youth to have an active voice, not just when election time comes around perennially or when funding is available, but as a part of the governance structure, And we don't see that happening at all. So take, for example, the monies allocated for youth development is generally very menial. It doesn't increase. It's not diversified to go beyond development of playing fields or sports facilities. You don't hear about increased literacy programs, persons who may have a passion for agricultural development in agro-processing, in technology, those who like history and are passionate about archives and preservation of cultural landscapes or the environment. It's not diversified to look at that, and unless we find ourselves in a position of crisis. And like I said earlier on, it's about responsibility. So the youth have a responsibility to themselves to work hard, to benefit from the opportunities that are given, and to work with whoever is willing to provide that platform as well. Older persons as well have a responsibility to youth to work with them to create an environment where all St. Lucians can feel comfortable in the space that we're growing in, and we can say that this is a community that I look forward to living in. I can aspire to build a business and own a home and start my family in.
You are a writer as well. You do write for, is it the UB paper or an online?
I write for the Barbados Today. It's in a column called Millennial Voices.
Right. So what is it that that you want to write about? What is it that's preoccupying you, that you want to get out there to let people know what you're thinking? Or is it your thinking, or is it an academic piece that you're putting out? Or what exactly, how you characterize what you write?
The writing that you do in a newspaper is completely different from an academic piece. Because when you write academically, there are persons who are within a particular field who may be interested in this. I would not write an academic paper in a newspaper, but what really drives what I write in the Barbados Today, Millennial Voices, is whatever is impacting the society at present. It might be something that's happening back home which is troubling to me, but generally it's whatever drives me, whatever is aching at my heart that I cannot physically do, I write about. So over the past few weeks, I have written about gender justice, women in society and their treatment within the justice system. I've written about the need for regional governments to do better, to work together to resolve national issues which are very similar. I've written about environmental degradation and the need for sustainable development. So it's a wide range of areas, but it speaks to the need for society to look at itself, whether that is culturally, politically, or economically, a wide range of issues.
This is the reality show on Calabash TV.
From your perspective, can youth get proactive and take the lead on certain things, or do they have to wait for a cue before doing something with, okay, for example, you mentioned the environment, for example. Do they have to wait for a cue from the environmental experts and agencies, or can youth decide, listen, this is our future, we are concerned about this, we want to get proactive in this area?
Anyone can act at any moment, at any time. There's never a wrong time to do the right thing. So youth can say, we believe that there's a particular river in a community that is of inherent value to us. It's part of our childhood memory. And we want our children to be able to experience that river too. So therefore, we're going online, or we're starting a campaign where we want to raise awareness. That can happen too. But there is also the need for expertise and partnership with individuals who may have done similar movements and strides. So yes, youth can take an active role in taking the lead and speaking on an issue, but it's always great to work in partnership with other groups and associations, because on a number of issues that have taken national stage as of recent time, you find that a group, a non-governmental organization will come up and say, well, this is very important to us, but they're standing alone. And when you have solidarity among other like-minded organizations, it gives greater strength. It builds when you have a coalition of forces, especially when very often the opposition that you are facing has a mechanism around it that is more powerful than you. There is strength in number.
When you're in your class with your other students who are, I suppose, studying political science and so on, when I suppose every day there's something interesting to discuss because it's currently so dynamic, and everything is a small world now because whatever happens in France today is basically in our face. So we have a good appreciation of what it is. Do the students look at things even when they discuss Caribbean politics now? How do they see it? Do they see it along political lines? Do you get from a sense from the discussion, the freestyle discussions in the classroom that somebody's perspective is based on how their affiliation to a political party or their preference for a political party and so on?
Okay. People's political persuasions are impacted by a variety of things. The university environment provides a platform where there is, I would not say an absence of judgment, but you're open to think differently without being critiqued or labeled, or for your parents to tell you, well, I don't want you to have these ideals, or this is how you must speak or vote on an issue. As regional developments happen, there is an awakening because you're now outside of the space and you're able to look at something and try to look at it constructively and to critique a particular issue. So let's take, for example, people speak about Trump's presidency in the United States, and then they analyze the treatment of the media, environmental issues, management of the economy, issues of immigration. Very often, when you look at it, it enables you to have a more refined look at your own space and environment and how politics is being shaped in the Caribbean. And I think a lot of young people at UE, when they have these opportunities to look at the world critically, it then enables them to look at themselves and their own political spaces and do the analysis for themselves as well.
And do you get a sense, because if you look at you've made reference to the US elections and so on, to the US political system, the recent elections, we saw quite a lot of youth, young persons coming out, quite a diverse turnout, and persons who became, positions in the House and so on. Do you get a feel now that youth are getting probably more actively considering getting into the mainstream, because most times people seem to think that we leave politics to politicians and so on, but is there a thinking that you think that, listen, we can make a difference, we need to get proactive and make a difference?
There is a mixed reaction, to be honest. Those who are of an independent political persuasion believe that, yes, it's my responsibility, I'm going to do more, I'm going to say more. And you see the commentary on social media taking place where persons speak about good governance, they speak about issues of corruption, of wanting better, what areas are priority for them. But then there is also those who are of an alternate persuasion who believe, well, yo tout se même kodi se gomon nakadi makamete vote me pour you. There are persons who think like that, just like there are adults who take a similar slant. But the interesting thing, and I want people to remember, is that no one is passive in a political system. Yes, you may decide that you're not going to vote or you're not going to say anything, but that does not stop policies and decisions from being made, and that doesn't stop it from impacting you as well. And once you become aware and interested in that, then you take a more vested interest in wanting to play an active role, because whatever happens in government happens to you. It impacts your family, and many people believe that they're in a bubble and that they're protected, and somehow, well, if I go about my business, then I'm going to be fine. And what happened in Barbados, I want to take the Barbadian example as a model for us to look at. There was 10 years of governance. Some positives came out of it, and there were also some very negative repercussions when it came to management of the economy and social affairs. And right now, persons who believe that, well, I am shielded, it's now impacting the cost and the quality of life, the number of opportunities that are available to people, and it brings a sense of hopelessness because you place your trust and you hope for certain things, and you believe that, okay, well, in the next 5 years, a particular government will come in and they'll be able to change. Time is something that Caribbean governments don't have the benefit of, because where we started off from, was from this advantage of having to build something out of nothing, having to build infrastructure and systems with limited resources. So when you take for granted certain political developments and strides and the use of resources and making the best out of your political term in office, you're jeopardizing a generation to come and depriving them of opportunities that they should be benefiting from.
So in that case, I went to a meeting, a political meeting with youth. Somebody who wanted to run for a particular constituency wanted to meet youth, and the youth were asking about, what can you do for us? And I thought, to me, that should have been the reverse. The youth should be telling the politicians what it is that we want you to do for us. That's why I spoke earlier on about being proactive. But so we don't have a youth manifesto prepared by the youth, which reflects the youth thinking and so on. Do you get a sense that the youth just see the politics as, oh well, that's their thing? When we get old enough, we'll eventually figure it out. But for the time being, it's them running it, and we're just there, and we don't have that deep. We're not taking that deep interest in what is going on to shape what is going to be obviously affecting us down the road.
While I cannot generalize, I believe there are some young persons who are ready and prepared to enter into the political field and take charge. Some, however, you have to ask for what reasons and for what purposes, because we're operating in a political culture at present which is very individualistic in nature, that focuses on gain rather than the collective good of all citizens. And that has a part to play in not just youth, but citizens in general believing that politicians are messiahs and that the only way they can facilitate progress or change in their communities is if a politician does it for them. And our politics does not engender politics of empowerment. So two things which stood out for me, and which are also a part of my study at UWI, is the fact that in communities, the community does for itself. It creates avenues for development for itself. Where there are needs, however limited, people rally together to get things done. Recently we saw in, I believe, the community of Canaries, they were able to get an ambulance for themselves by working cooperatively with the diaspora group in the UK and with members of the Canaries community. That is a wonderful example of people empowering themselves and not simply stating, well, we want it and we're not getting it, so what are we going to do? And any progressive government and any progressively modern political party in the St. Lucian context must be able to have the community as an active partner. That's not a token that they come in and they pander to them and say, well, we are going to whatever, and we have all the ideas, because no political party has all the ideas. How do you strengthen your communities and your citizens so that first and foremost they're not a liability to themselves and thereafter to the society on a larger scale?
I can almost safely say that you weren't born yet during independence, when we became independent?
I was not born.
Okay, good. I can safely say that. So, do you have a connection? And I'm just, when I say you, I'm talking about the youth. Is there a connection to independence? Is this something that's historical, that's way beyond our time, and that the youth can't connect, or can they connect? How do they see independence? Do they see it as part of their own history and part of their own, what makes them St. Lucian?
You've given me an
assignment.
Not an assignment, but it's a very loaded question. Because very often, unless you experience something, the level of passion and connection to it is not as it would be for someone who had lived the experience. So independence right now, for many people, it comes and it goes. And the problem inherent in that is that we celebrate independence as if it were just a day. From a political science, a historical, a cultural, a development point of view, independence is supposed to be about a continuous process. It's supposed to be about people and the improvement of their lives and where they are today. And I think many young people believe that independence is sort of a facade when they look at the nature of development that we have at present. And if I am to inject my own personal views, independence should have been the continuation of an emancipation process. So we inherited a particular society that was not of our own making, and we want to see ourselves in our institutions, culturally, historically, being represented. 40 years onwards, do you really see that? Is there space for a St. Lucian identity that is not put down and picked up only when it can be monetized, where you want to, for example, sell citizenship, and not only that, where what is deemed important is guided not by the well-being of a citizen, but by a foreign entity or a tourist, because we sell the image of St. Lucia. And if you were to ask the average St. Lucia, not just the youth, what makes you proud about your island? When you go out to the world, what do you see? Many persons will speak about the natural beauty and they will say 2 Nobel laureates, but ask them to go deeper about values, about cultural legacies, resilience, and people and heroines and heroes from history. Many people can't do that. Are we creating an educational space where you're creating a citizen who is proud to be St. Lucian, not by accident, but by design? And I don't think we're doing that.
Interesting, because we're celebrating, as you know, our 40th anniversary, and it's 4 decades. It's quite a long time. And I'll ask you the question. When you look at, and I think you mentioned celebrate a while ago, from the youth perspective, what do you see that, is it just we acknowledging a day, or are there things that we can celebrate? Apart we have the Nobel laureates and so on, and they've done us proud and so on, but the independence itself, do you get a sense that we are anywhere close to being an independent country?
There are multiple layers of independence and of being a sovereign territory. There is the legal aspect where, yes, we are an independent state that follows the Westminster parliamentary democracy, but in terms of internal development and ensuring that you have full control and autonomy, and culturally, what impacts your institutions and your values and your ideals and visions is inherently St. Lucian. I'm not sure if we're completely there as yet. I believe when it comes to being an independent territory and state, when you can say that your citizens know they have 2 Nobel laureates, but is the content of what they have done shared or taught in schools? That's very questionable. When you have communities which, like I mentioned earlier, build themselves through kudme, where you have traditional dances like the kutumba, where you have janjune, june poete, when you have your own indigenous language, but your people are not literate in it, that speaks volumes about where society is. Where in schools, the identity that you want to share with your students is that they were 7 times British and 7 times French, which is very colonial in its orientation, or where the rules and policies when it comes to black hair continue to be inherent features within your Caribbean society. It says something about you when you look at your economic development and where your priorities lie in terms of governance. And I'm speaking about for the entire 40 years of independence, where a priority is on infrastructure, but not transforming a society socially. So that when people speak about crime, we want crime to be solved, but we don't want to work out issues of inequality. The fact that our children are falling through gaps in our school systems, that we don't cater for the differently able and persons who may not bloom at the same time. These are all the things that matter when it comes to being independent, that you're not easily swayed or flip-flopped by the pressures of imperial powers, which still exist today. They may not be as explicit as in days gone by, but these are very important things that need to happen, where you can have cultural icons who die and pass away, and the only time that your youth will know about them is when they've died. It says that you're missing something and that you're failing to transmit something. And then when you're raising a particular generation that now does not reflect the values that you would want them to have, but you've never taught them about it, then it says something about you that there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. We can do so much more with what we have.
This is Our Reality, Calabash TV. This is happening. This is our reality. This is Calabash TV.
Do you feel the pressure as a young person yourself that there's a lot of work for you to do to convince your parents?
I feel a lot of responsibility, yes, simply because I've had access to a lot of things, and I know that people who have come before me have done so much. There is pressure. There is a responsibility to myself to see the kind of society that I want to see. I know that I have a part to play in it. I know I have a responsibility to my niece and my nephew to have the same and even more opportunities that I've had and come to know. There's a need to do better in general, of just knowing that to have the kind of society that you want, that there are sacrifices. Many people want to reap the benefits of having high GDP and being able to go to schools and whatnot, but they're not prepared to make the investments, contribute the ideas, and also be willing to be put through the fire of being criticized by a society that will tell you, who do you think you are, and why do you think that what you're saying is important? Yes.
Okay, so who do you think you are, and what do you think what you're saying is important? You've been you're writing about some national issues as well. Talk to us about when you look at it from outside, because you spend most of your time out, but I'm sure you follow quite closely what's happening here, and you see what's going on. What are your thoughts as a young person? And we know you've done some writing. I think you've spoken about our economic development models and so on. What are the things that concern you the most about the direction that we're taking?
The things that concern me the most, the first thing that comes to mind, and I always think about it, is how we relate to each other as people first. Because our political parties and our politics will not change unless the people change. And particularly in the last election, what troubled me was the fact that the way we spoke about each other created a very venomous environment where solidarity, cooperation, and coalition building was not possible in my view. I found that very often we spoke to each other in a manner that did not respect the dignity of the other. But
that's been
yes, but it was even heightened at this point where you would, and because of the fact that you have social media now, the nastiest and most repugnant things come out, where you, rather than challenging somebody's ideas, you try to debate that the person even has intelligence, that they're backward, that they're stupid, that they make no sense. And automatically, when you have insulted a person's dignity, later down the line, when both of you, whether you are Labour, you are UWP, you are independent, later down the line, there might be an issue that requires that all of you come together because it's cross-cutting, it's not partisan, it's national. You will not be able to come together and to find greater resolve, because already you've told the person that they don't matter. They don't matter, so why are you now speaking to them? Why do you now want to have the conversation? So for me, that in itself was troubling. Secondly, our political system and structure really emphasizes and stresses the importance of an identity that is linked to being a member of a party. And I find a lot of persons hold closer to who they are as a member of a party as opposed to who they are as a solution. And when they think about loyalty, it's a bastardized version of loyalty. Loyalty at any cost. Loyalty where the organizations or institutions that you belong to, when you see them straying away from the principles of days gone by, or even betraying national trust and national interest and your well-being and the well-being of your children, when you can turn a blind eye to that and not ask them to be accountable. We have a responsibility. You can support a political party or forward a particular ideology, but when it goes too far and it contributes to the denigration of your society, you have the responsibility to say, this is not what we want. You need to change. And if you do not change, you will not gain our support. But right now, I think many people believe that to disagree, whether it's with the opposition or with the ruling party, is essentially an attack on themselves, and they don't want to do so. It's a matter of pride. I think then there's no real scope for development and change. What also is bothering me is that we don't really have standards in our politics as of present. People speak, but their walk and their talk don't always come together and meet up. And beyond that, both parties have stated, well, they're for integrity and good governance, but none have really taken the charge in terms of saying, well, we're going to have the constitutional backing to say that no matter who is in power, the law is there to ensure that whether you are black or white, you are blue, green, pink, you are going to abide and follow suit with whatever the law of the land says. And it's to protect the people, and it's to protect ourselves from ourselves as well. Because if I'm in a political party where once I am in government, you generally have absolute control. Very often it's very difficult unless you have very principled individuals to say, well, we're not going to take a particular course of action. That's why when you have particular policies and they come into play, and maybe there might be safeguards in terms of due diligence and security, another political party can come in and just take it off as well.
So that's one of the challenges. Is there much cause for hope based on what you described in terms of the fact that the political systems are going to be staying as they are? We don't see, or do you see change somewhere?
There is always hope once you're alive. There is always hope once you're alive and you have an opportunity of choice and choosing. And we do have choices before us. It's a matter of whether we want to make the choices that are necessary, whether we want to wait until crisis point. Because Margaret Thatcher had this saying, there is no other alternative. To maintain control and the status quo, you always tell someone you have no choice. And if people honestly believe that, then they're ensuring that the political structure as it is continues, but it benefits someone for some purpose. But if the people decide that right now the kind of candidates or individuals we want to be represented in our political system have to have a clean track record, there is a legislation with integrity, they must declare their assets before entering politics, then you are setting up yourself for a better system with greater accountability, greater transparency, and beyond that, the people themselves, because politicians come from our communities. They represent, for the good or for the bad, values that we hold. Are our values constructive values, values that feed into who we were, the values of our folk, the foundations they gave us when it came to relations with each other, that mon pli do play larger? Or do we see ourselves as individuals as being more important than the whole?
There's a lot more questions I wanted to ask you, and then you made a reference to a few Creole phrases a couple of times. I wanted to talk to you about that as well, but I'm sure we'll have some more discussions with you. You about leaving to go back to university to pursue studies for your master's, is it? What areas are you zooming in on, and how do you see yourself in a couple of years? What do you see yourself in a couple of years' time?
You asked me this question, and multiple people have asked me this question. My master's is an MPhil in political science, and it focuses on governance, in particular Creole governance, with an examination of St. Lucia and Kudme. And what really motivated me to do this, to me it's my work to St. Lucia. I could have chosen any field, but very often you critique a system, but you never offer alternatives. And what has happened not only in St. Lucia but the rest of the Caribbean is that at independence there were expectations that the people had, that perhaps with a British declaration saying that you are an independent state, that automatically transformation would have happened. But that did not take place. We inherited colonial institutions that mimicked British parliamentary styles and procedures. However, it did not take into consideration our own historical backgrounds and growing. And I think that there is a uniquely St. Lucian, also Caribbean way of life, way of government that is participatory in nature, where there is strength in citizenship and community that has not been harnessed at present in our current political structure and system. And what my work really is aiming to do is twofold. One is to recognize the work of our folk in how they were able to build the foundations of our communities, whether it was in establishing our first road networks, our water systems, in preserving certain cultural traditions with our flower festivals in terms of language, and even in economic systems with the Susu and our first indigenous bank being First National Bank. It's a look at what we have been able to build, not from a colonial point of view, but at the grassroots level, which we don't really seize into to foster real growth, real development that is people-centered. Because people matter. Without people, you have nothing. So if you forget that people are important and that they matter to the system, then you become a society that is eating out at itself and will disintegrate after a particular period of time. And secondly, it's now to offer and say, we have the opportunity to shape before it's too late, because 40 years is still relatively young when you compare yourself to more mature democracies that have had centuries to develop off the back of enslavement economically and otherwise. We have the opportunity now to create a space for ourselves where our language is represented, the ideals that we have are represented as well, and that you don't ignore what happened at the community level when you are fostering development. You don't exclude the people, and when you've made a decision, if at all, then you tell them they have to be part at the beginning, in the end, to be part of the process because you're doing it for them.
Right, so we want to have a longer conversation with you, but we know you have to, to get back to your studies. We'd like to wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
And we extend an invitation to you when you come back. Feel free to visit us because we want to have an ongoing discussion with you as well. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate it, and all the best.
I really appreciate the opportunity. I want to wish all St. Lucians a very conscious and constructive independence whenever this program is. Thank you for the opportunity.
This is The Reality Show.